Hello, today I welcome you back to this session for today. Uh, we are going to be discussing how to identify workplace hazards and occupational health and safety practices. This is actually lesson 3. The first presentation carried 2 lessons. So this is actually lesson 3, where we learn on how to identify workplace hazards, and it is your responsibility, you as a security officer, you as an employee, to support the management, to support the occupational work and health committee to identify hazards. So I am going to proceed here and say that to identify workplace hazards and risks. We said in the last presentation, it was during the introduction part, that hazard is anything, e.g. condition, situation, practice, or behavior that has potential to cause harm, including injury, disease, death, environmental property, and equipment damage. It can be a thing or a situation. So we say hazard identification. Hazard identification is the process of examining each work area and working task for purpose of identifying hazards inherent in the job. You assess, you examine each work area, and your intention is to identify hazards that exist in the job. And then it is also, before we continue, we say that a risk we said is the likelihood or a possibility of a hazard occurring, e.g. Injury, illness, damage may occur from exposure to a hazard. I hope you remember those definitions. Now, risk control, another new term. Risk control is taking actions to eliminate health and safety risks as far as is reasonably practical. We usually say we cannot eliminate health and safety risks 100%. We eliminate them to as far as it is reasonably possible. And then monitoring and review, this is also another term. This involves ongoing monitoring, the hazard identified, risks assessed, and control processes, and reviewing them to make sure that they are working. So monitoring is very, very important when we still talk about hazard identification and also hazard and risk control. Now, hazard identification in the workplace and or its indicators of its presence. How do we identify hazards? The workplace hazards may include the following. Safety hazards. These include unsafe workplace conditions that may result from confined space, excavations, failing objects, gas leak, electric fault, waste spillage, debris, poor storage of tools and materials. Those are safety hazards at the workplace. Then unsafe work behaviors. These include smoking in prohibited areas, substance and alcohol use at the workplace, etc. And then we have physical hazards. This may include radioactive vibration, extreme temperatures, presence of noise, and extreme illumination. These are what we call physical hazards. And then also, when we talk about unsafe work behavior, we must also mention agronomical hazards. This includes psychological factors like excessive pressure, fatigue, and varying metabolic cycles. For example, in most cases at the workplace, employees are placed under excessive pressure. Employees work very many hours. There are labor laws which require you work a certain hours per shift, but you find that due to logistics, most companies subject employees to very long hours. You look at the security people in Kenya and even in the healthcare, they work for over 12 hours a day or even 16 hours a day, which places somebody under intense pressure, and also somebody is fatigued, and then that becomes an agronomical hazard. And then we also talk of chemical hazards. They may include dust, smoke, fumes, gases, and vapors. Those are what we call chemical hazards. And then we also talk of biological hazards. These are hazards resulting from bacteria, viruses, plants, parasites, mites, mold, fungi, and insects. These are biological hazards. Now, the hazards and the risk indicators. There are indicators at the workplace that can show you that hazards are existing, risks are existing. A high rate of increased incidences of accidents and injuries. If there is a progression in the number of injuries or accidents at the workplace, then that could be an indicator that hazards are hazards are present and the risks are very high. Then increase in occurrence of sickness or health complaints and symptoms. Increase in occurrence of sickness or health complaints and symptoms. And then common complaints of workers as aspects related to occupational safety and health. And then cases of high absenteeism from work, related reasons that may affect the normal working trend. If most of your employees are not reporting for duty because they are absent for apparent no reasons, then they could be facing hazards that are existing, maybe psychological, that are making them want to stay away from the workplace. So these are some of the risk, hazard and risk indicators. And then we also speak about evaluation and or work environment measurements. Evaluation or work environment measurements of occupational safety and health hazards, stroke risk existing in the workplace, is conducted by authorized personnel or agency. This measurement may include the following: health audits. You find that at the workplace, health audits are carried out. This is a process by which professionals assess, evaluate, and improve care of workers in a systematic way. It measures current practice against defined standards. It forms part of health governance, which aims to safeguard high quality care of workers. And then we also say, apart from health audits, there is also safety audit. It is used to describe an activity where a facility gets information about one or more aspects of the workplace in order to evaluate the risk levels for health and safety issues. It is a structured process where information is collected relating to the efficiency, effectiveness, and reliability of a company's total health and safety management system. You will find that the government, through its regulators, they send safety auditors to come and examine your workplace. Also, you as a security professional, you as a security manager, you can conduct a safety audit internally. There are external safety audits and there are internal safety audits that you can carry out to assess the situation of the workplace with the aim of evaluating hazards and risks. And then there is also work safety. This describes procedures in place to ensure safety and health of employee. It involves hazard identification and action according to government standards and ongoing safety training and education for employees. The occupational safety and health issues can be gathered from employees by a number of methods. These methods include: 1. Questionnaires. 2. Oral interviews. 3. By use of suggestion boxes. You have seen at the workplaces suggestion boxes. You have seen at the workplaces questionnaires questioning you about the safety issues existing at the work, and also this can also be done through oral interviews. When you walk around on patrol and you ask junior employees whether they are safe at their workplace, or even senior managers, then you may conduct an assessment through oral interviews. Data analysis is another way that we can collect information related to occupational health and safety. The data collected using these methods is analyzed to get the required information to facilitate site taking of the corrective actions. The concerns may concern the following aspects: environmental safety, workplace safety, machine safety, worker welfare issues, compensation issues in case of injury or loss of life, and then operational hours and maximum exposure limit. These are some of the areas of concern that you may be looking at or you may be examining. Other areas also may include issues that concern raised by workers, how these are gathered. When workplace hazards have been identified and controls introduced, top management, supervisors, safety and health personnel, employees, and employee representatives should be provided with the training that describes these control measures. Standards developed by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration require the employer to train employees in safety and health aspects of their jobs, initially upon assignment or annually. It is recommended that at induction phase or orientation phase, there is an occupational health and safety session where employees are trained on safety at the workplace. Many companies do this, and also many companies don't do this. It is very important during induction to have the employees walk around their workplace with a representative from the Occupational Health and Safety Committee or a representative from the Security Department and induct them accordingly on the safety and health hazards that exist. And then we also have certified, competent, or qualified professionals. OSHA standards make it the employee's responsibility to limit certain job assignments to employees who are certified, competent, or qualified, meaning that they have had special previous training in or out of the workplace. For example, operation of machines. If at your workplace you are using Caterpillar, a Caterpillar is an excavator. So if you are not certified, if you are not competent, if you are not qualified to operate an excavator, then you should not be allowed by your employer to operate this sensitive machine, because you may end up causing injury to yourself and injury to others by your actions or omissions. So you must be certified, you must be competent to work in a particular section. For example, if you look at the hotel industry, those people who work in the kitchen, the stewarding department, they must be qualified, trained in handling of hazardous chemicals, handling of hazardous detergents that they use in the cleaning process. People who work in the laundry, the same. People who work in housekeeping, the same. People who work in the engineering department, the same. They must be trained, they must be competent on how to handle and how to use these corrosive chemicals, corrosive detergents, and even dangerous weapons. Not dangerous weapons, dangerous equipment. Then, designated personnel. The term designated personnel means selected or assigned by the employer or the employer's representative as being qualified to perform specific duties. Designated is similar to what we have talked about. You must be qualified, you must be trained, and you must be certified. And then training records. Training records provide evidence of the employer's good faith and compliance with occupational safety, health, and Act standards. And then documentation. Supply an answer to an accident investigator. Was the injured employee trained to do the job? These are some of the questions that arise when there is an injury. Many researchers and studies conclude that those who are new on the job have a higher rate of accidents and injuries than more experienced workers. That is why it is important to induct employees and to train them at their induction phase. Then we complete section 3, which was very brief, and then we also go to section 4, see whether we can cover this one in this same session. Then how to identify and implement appropriate control measures to hazards and risks. How to identify and implement appropriate controls measures to hazards and risks. This section focuses on addressing prevention and control measures to hazards, including the use of PPEs. Nowadays, we know PPEs after the COVID pandemic outbreak. PPEs are personal protective equipment. Taking appropriate risk controls as well as contingency measures recognized and re-established in accordance to the workplace procedures. Let us define some terms briefly. Definition of key terms. Hazard prevention and control. Hazard prevention and control are efforts geared towards protecting workers from the workplace hazards. Help avoid injuries, illness, and incidents. Minimize or eliminate safety and health risk. and help provide workers with safe and healthful working conditions. That is hazard prevention and control. And then we have personal protective equipment. It is one of the important means to protect the wearer from hazards in the workplace. It is the last frontier of the wearer from a working station. Hazards should be selected based on the job scope and intended protection. For example, if you are working with machines where you are likely to suffer eye injuries, then you are supposed to be putting on eye protective measures. If you are working with an area which is very slippery, with water flows is very slippery, then you must be wearing shoes that are anti-slip, or they must place anti-slip mats into those areas. So personal protective equipment, we use them depending on the identified risk, no, the identified hazard, and also the level of risk. We say there are prevention and control measures for specific hazards. There are 6 major control measures to hazards. One is use of personal protective equipment. Please note something here. 6 major control measures to hazards. 6 major control measures to hazards. And one is use of personal protective equipment. And then 2 is elimination. And then 3 is substitution. And then 4 is isolation. And then 5 is engineering controls. And then 6 is administrative controls. These are the 6 major control measures to hazards. 6 major control measures to hazards. Use of personal protective equipment, elimination, substitution, isolation, engineering controls, and administrative controls. Now, we shall look at each one of them independently. Elimination. It is often cheaper and more practical to eliminate hazards at the design or planning stage of a product, process, or place used for work. In these early stages, there is a greater scope to design out hazards or incorporate risk control measures that are compatible with the original design and functional requirements. For example, remove trip hazards on the floor or dispose of unwanted chemicals. This involves getting rid of dangerous machine, tool, and equipment away from the work environment. Substitution. If it is not reasonably practical to eliminate the hazards and associated risks, you should minimize the risk. Today, the dangers associated with asbestos are well known, and there are numerous alternatives to asbestos products currently on the market, including cellulose fiber, thermoset plastic, floor, or polythene foams. Replacing solvent-based paints with water-based ones is also a better alternative. In this case, the faulty machine or tool or equipment is replaced by a safe one. So substitution is actually removing the material that could pose danger to employees from the workplace and substituting that with something that is safe. For example, if a machine is dangerous to employees, after a period of time, several accidents has happened while employees are working with this particular equipment or machine, then it is a safe idea to replace it with another alternative. That is what we mean by substitution. Removing that one is dangerous and bringing in that one that is a little bit safe. And then isolation. This involves physically separating the source of harm from people by distance or using barriers. Isolation. Introducing a strict work area, using guardrails around exposed edges and holes in the floors, using remote control systems to operate machinery, enclosing a noisy process from a person, and storing chemicals in a fume cabinet are examples. Those are examples of isolation. Isolation is physically separating the source of harm from people by distance or using barriers. We see storage is one of the forms of isolation. And then engineering controls. An engineering control is a control measure that is physical in nature, including a mechanical device or process. For example, this can be done through the use of machine guards, effective ventilation systems, and setting work rates on a roster to reduce fatigue. Involves incorporating engineering design to reduce accidents and hazards, e.g. having guards. The same, this is engineering control. Engineering control is a control measure that is physical in nature, including a mechanical device or a process. And then we also look at administrative control. We are looking at the 6 major controls. Administrative control. Administrative controls are work methods or procedures that are designed to minimize exposure to hazard, establish appropriate procedures, and safe work practices, such as limit exposure time to hazardous tasks so that fewer employees are exposed, routine maintenance and housekeeping procedures, training on hazards and correct work methods, and use signs to warn people of hazard. This involves training and a proper sensitization on how to use equipment safely, occupational safety and health related topics, issue warning signs, and work operation shifts and proper work operation shift. This is administrative control. Administrative control, you can say, for example, is ensuring people work in accordance with the labels. That people work in accordance with the labels. We follow the procedures that are supposed to be in place to ensure that people are safe. People are not fatigued. People are not put under a lot of pressure. And fatigue and pressure, as we have seen before, leads to high chances of people actually encountering injuries and people getting into difficult situations. So it is important to follow administrative controls, and that means following the labor laws and company regulations and rules. And then finally, we talk about personal protective equipment. You all know about personal protective equipment. Use of personal protective equipment: provide suitable and properly maintained personal protective equipment and ensure employees are trained in its proper use. Examples include gloves, ear plugs, face masks, hats for the head, gloves, aprons, and protective eyewear. PPE limits exposure to harmful effects of a hazard, but only if workers wear and use them correctly. You'll find that at the workplace, some workers don't wear this personal protective equipment properly. They don't use them properly. It is the role of security during inspections, during patrols, to get hold of these people and book them and bring them to the attention of the HR department and the departmental heads so they may face a disciplinary action, because they are endangering themselves by their actions, and they are also endangering others by their omissions and also by their actions. So ensure people are wearing personal protective equipment. And then risk control. We look at risk control. We have finished with the control measures. Risk control. Appropriate risk controls based on the results of occupational safety and health hazard evaluation is recommended. Risk control is the set of methods by which firms evaluate potential losses and take action to reduce or eliminate such threats. It is a technique that utilizes findings from risk assessments, which involve identifying potential risk factors in a company's operations, such as technical and non-technical aspects of the business, financial policies, and other issues that may affect the well-being of the firm. It also implements proactive changes to reduce risk in these areas. Risk control helps companies limit lost assets and income. Risk control. And then factors to consider in risk control. The following aspects can be considered in risk control. Isolate the hazard from anyone who could be harmed, i.e., keep the machine in a closed room and operate it remotely. Use design control to eliminate the risk. Use personal protective equipment to control the risk. Prevention and control measures outlined previously are the methods used in risk control. Administrative engineering, use of personal protective gear, etc. Those are the methods used in risk. And then after these factors, we look at contingency measures. Contingency measures are plans that are put in place, safety measures put in place to prevent employees from, to protect employees from hazards. In relation to occupational health and safety, contingency measures refer to plans involving suitable immediate action for responding to accidental hazards and emergencies. It refers to security measures put forward for emergency response to reduce the effects of system disruption and increase system efficiency. The contingency measures include evacuation, isolation, decontamination, engage emergency personnel, and emergency procedures. And then we can look at evacuation. This involves removal of people or operatives from the scene of a hazard or accident to prevent the situation worsening. It also involves further medical attention, i.e. evacuation to a medical facility. So you as a security professional, you must be well versed, you must be well knowledgeable in evacuation, how to evacuate people from risky areas to safer zones and ultimately to evacuate them to medical facilities. And then we talk about isolation. The affected victims can be isolated to give a secrecy and more attention to prevent spread. Now we are talking about measures that are called contingency measures as it relates to occupational health and safety. Quarantine is a word used to define the separation or restriction of movement of a person who may have been exposed to a communicable disease to see if they become ill. Isolation separates sick people with a contagious disease from people who are not sick. If you have been diagnosed positive for COVID-19, you will be asked to isolate for a period of time to be determined by a medical professional. Decontamination, you all know this word, you have come across it in the event of exposure to chemical hazards where the level of contamination can be controlled, then it can be done. Decontamination is a series of processes that effectively remove or destroy infectious agents or other contaminants, e.g. organic matter, in order to prevent the spread of infection. Decontamination for infection control include cleaning, enhanced cleaning, and disinfection. And then also we talk about engagement of emergency personnel. This involves getting an expert where possible to address situations. There must be an emergency plan existing at your workplace where if something goes wrong, then you can easily get hold of emergency personnel to offer specialized evacuation services and also prevent more people from getting injured. And then we have emergency procedures. The following procedures can be used to address hazards. What we are talking about, this issue should be included in a manual under the Occupational Health and Safety Act or under the Occupational Health and Safety Committee. There should be a manual that details all these things. And the manual alone doesn't help. Employee must be trained, employee must be inducted to be able to follow these procedures, to be able to understand them. Drills must be conducted. Exercises must be conducted. For example, the following procedures can be used to address hazards: fire drill, first aid, use of fire extinguishers, basic life support, earthquake drill where applicable, disaster management preparedness, pull the nearest fire alarm, use the nearest exit. Do not use elevators. Persons with disabilities, take your belongings if they are nearby. Move to a safe distance. Re-enter only if directed to do so by first responders. These are emergency procedures that should be well documented, and people should be trained, and people should understand them, and exercises should be carried out. And then we also say incidences and emergencies. The following incidences and emergencies should be addressed and identified where applicable: fire, leaks, equipment stroke machine accidents, explosion, injury of personnel, structural support failure, toxic emissions. People should be trained on how to respond or how to behave in the event of these situations. So find out from your workplace if these emergency procedures are in existence. If they are not in existence, then it is time you have to think about it. And then summary, we say this section addressed hazards prevention and control measures, appropriate risk controls, contingency measures, emergency procedures, as well as incidents in the workplace in accordance with the workplace practices. You need to be prepared. You need to be on the lookout always so that we may protect ourselves and we may protect others at the workplace. We said employers have their duties, employees have their duties, and we said your number one duty is to ensure your own safety and then the safety of others who are at the workplace. Your actions or omissions must ensure your number one responsibility. That's your number one duty. Ensure your personal safety and safety of others who are at the workplace. I wish to stop there. We are going to continue with this training. We shall go to the third part, the third part of this occupational health and safety presentation, and I will introduce you the topic that we shall be tackling when we reach that time. For now, thank you very much, and once again, my name is Mr. Wayne Magani, and if you have any questions, then you can write to me. My email is maganiwayne@yahoo.com. You just write maganiwayne@yahoo.com. MAGANIWAYNE@yahoo.com. In the next presentation, I will write it clearly for you so that you may send me an email if you have any question or any guidance need. You need to be guided more, or if you need for me to answer any question or any concern, then you can write for me. So please be prepared, be aware, be ready. Thank you very much. See you again next time. Bye-bye.